The champagne dripped down my face onto my simple black dress as the room fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, forks clattered against plates, and 50 pairs of eyes turned to watch the scene unfold in Rebecca's perfectly decorated dining room. "How dare you speak to that man in my house?" Rebecca screamed, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at James Bennett, who stood awkwardly by the appetizer table. "You know what he did to me." My brother Thomas rushed to my side with a napkin. "Beck, you've gone too far." "Too far?" Rebecca's laugh was shrill. "That man destroyed my career at Morton and Price. And now my own sister-in-law is chatting with him like they're old friends." I dabbed at my face, maintaining my composure despite the expensive champagne ruining my makeup. The same champagne Rebecca had mockingly called wasted on someone with such pedestrian taste earlier this evening. "James and I were discussing business," I said quietly, watching her face contort with disdain. "Business?" she sneered. "What would a middle school math teacher know about real business, about running a fashion empire?" If she only knew about the meetings I'd been having all month, the papers I'd signed yesterday, the changes coming to her precious elite fashion group. "Rebecca," James stepped forward. "I didn't fire you from Morton and Price. You were asked to resign after you claimed I was leaking designs to competitors." She whirled on him. "But look at me now. Vice President of Marketing at Elite Fashion Group. I'm worth 10 times what I was at your pathetic company." I caught James's eye and saw his slight nod. He knew what was coming. After all, he'd been instrumental in the deal. "Speaking at the Lit Fashion Group," I began, but Rebecca cut me off. "Don't even pretend to understand my world, Sarah. Go back to your little classroom with your little salary and your off-the-rack clothes." She gestured dismissively. "Some of us were meant for bigger things." Thomas tried to intervene again. "Rebecca, that's enough." "No, let her finish," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'd love to hear more about Elite Fashion Group's success, especially the recent quarterly reports." Rebecca's perfect smile faltered slightly. "What would you know about our reports?" "More than you think." I scrolled through my emails. For instance, I know about the manufacturing delays in Milan, the failed launch in Asian markets, the hemorrhaging of major investors. The color drained from her face. "Those are confidential." And the internal investigation into leaked designs. I looked pointedly at James. History does have a way of repeating itself. "How dare you?" She grabbed another glass of champagne, but Thomas caught her wrist before she could throw it. "Because," I said, pulling up a final email, "as of yesterday at 5 p.m., I own controlling interest in a late fashion group." The glass slipped from Rebecca's hand, shattering on the imported marble floor. "That's impossible." "The buyout was by Aurora Investments, my investment firm," I finished for her. "The same one that acquired Morton and Price last year. James here has been an excellent advisor in fashion industry acquisitions." The room had gone so quiet you could hear the classical music playing softly in the background. A playlist I knew Rebecca had carefully curated to impress her guests. "You're lying," she whispered, but there was fear in her eyes now. I forwarded the email to her phone and watched her hands shake as she read the official announcement that would go public on Monday. 15 years, I said softly. 15 years of you mocking my career choices, my clothes, my lifestyle, all while embezzling from every company you worked for. I never." "Save it for the board meeting on Monday." I smiled. "Oh, did I mention? James is returning as CEO. We have some interesting files to discuss." Thomas looked between us, realization dawning. "Sarah, all those evening classes you were taking." "Business administration and corporate law," I nodded. Turns out teaching math was excellent preparation for analyzing fashion industry financials. Rebecca's guests had begun to whisper, phones already lighting up as the city's elite picked up on the drama unfolding. Her carefully constructed social facade was cracking. "You can't do this to me," she hissed. "I'm family." "Family?" I laughed. "Was it family when you told everyone at my father's funeral that I was a disappointment to him? When you spread rumors that I couldn't afford a real career? When you excluded my students from your precious fashion mentorship program because they weren't from the right neighborhoods?" James stepped forward. "The board meeting is at 9 a.m. sharp, Rebecca. I suggest you bring your resignation letter." "And Rebecca," I added, picking up my modest handbag, the one she'd ridiculed earlier. "That champagne you just threw? I own the vineyard now, too. As I turned to leave, Thomas caught my arm. Why didn't you ever tell me about building an investment empire while teaching algebra? I smiled. Some lessons are better learned through demonstration. The last thing I saw as I walked out was Rebecca sinking into her expensive dining chair, mascara running down her face, staring at the email that spelled the end of her fashionable facade. Monday was going to be interesting indeed. Monday morning arrived with a media frenzy outside a late fashion group's headquarters. Rebecca's dramatic party scene had already made the rounds on social media, with #TeacherBoss trending alongside leaked clips of her champagne throw. I walked into the boardroom at exactly 8:55 a.m., wearing a custom suit from James's new independent label. Rebecca sat at her usual spot, clutching a Hermes bag I knew she charged to the company account last month. Before we begin, she announced desperately, I want to clarify that Saturday's events were a personal matter. Actually, I interrupted, taking my seat at the head of the table. Your public assault of the company's new owner is very much a business matter. The board members, mostly Rebecca's carefully selected allies, shifted uncomfortably. James entered with a thick folder of documents. Let's start with the Milan disaster, he said, distributing reports. Specifically, how designs were leaked to competitors weeks before launch. Rebecca's perfectly styled hair couldn't hide her nervous fidgeting. That was never proven. Page 3, I directed the board. Bank transfers from rival fashion house to an offshore account. The same pattern we found at Morton and Price 3 years ago. You've been investigating me, Rebecca's voice cracked. For 18 months, James confirmed. Ever since Sarah approached me about acquiring a lit fashion group. I pulled up the presentation screen. While you were mocking my little teacher's salary, I was building a case. Every leaked design, every embezzled fund, every false expense report. Those bags were for work, she protested. Monday morning arrived with a media frenzy outside a late fashion group's headquarters. Rebecca's dramatic party scene had already made the rounds on social media, with #TeacherBoss trending alongside leaked clips of her champagne throw. I walked into the boardroom at exactly 8:55 a.m., wearing a custom suit from James's new independent label. Rebecca sat at her usual spot, clutching a Hermes bag I knew she charged to the company account last month. Before we begin, she announced desperately, I want to clarify that Saturday's events were a personal matter. Actually, I interrupted, taking my seat at the head of the table. Your public assault of the company's new owner is very much a business matter. The board members, mostly Rebecca's carefully selected allies, shifted uncomfortably. James entered with a thick folder of documents. Let's start with the Milan disaster, he said, distributing reports. Specifically, how designs were leaked to competitors weeks before launch. Rebecca's perfectly styled hair couldn't hide her nervous fidgeting. That was never proven. Page 3, I directed the board. Bank transfers from rival fashion house to an offshore account. The same pattern we found at Morton and Price 3 years ago. You've been investigating me, Rebecca's voice cracked. For 18 months, James confirmed. Ever since Sarah approached me about acquiring a lit fashion group. I pulled up the presentation screen. While you were mocking my little teacher's salary, I was building a case. Every leaked design, every embezzled fund, every false expense report. Those bags were for work, she protested. The 10 Birkins charged to marketing research. I clicked through photos, or the business trips to Paris that just happened to coincide with Fashion Week. Thomas, whom I'd invited as a witness, watched his wife crumble. Beck, what did you do? What I had to, she snapped. To maintain appearances, to be taken seriously in this industry. To feed your ego, I corrected, while rejecting talented designers because they didn't come from wealthy families. The board members reviewed the evidence, their faces growing darker. Rebecca's biggest supporter, a man who frequently flirted with her at company events, wouldn't meet her eyes. You have 2 options, I stated clearly. Resign quietly and return the embezzled funds, or face public prosecution. You wouldn't dare, she whispered. Think of what this would do to Thomas. Like you thought of him when you were stealing from the company? I raised an eyebrow. Or when you were meeting that junior designer in Paris? Thomas's head snapped up. Rebecca went pale. That's right, I continued. We have those receipts too. The solo business trips weren't so solo, were they? I can explain. She turned to Thomas, but he was already walking out of the boardroom. Your resignation letter, James placed it in front of her. Or should we continue with the Paris photos? Her hand trembled as she reached for the pen. Everything I built. You built nothing, I corrected. You stole, cheated, and climbed over others. Now we're going to show you what real leadership looks like. By ruining me? By transforming this company. I stood up. The mentorship program you rejected, we're implementing it across all departments. Those scholarship cases you mocked, they're getting internships. Real fashion should be accessible to everyone with talent, not just those with trust funds. Rebecca's signature was shaky but final. As security waited to escort her out, she turned to me one last time. I never understood, she said quietly. How did a math teacher outsmart me? Because I actually did the math, I replied. And unlike you, I learned that true value isn't in the price tag. As she was led out, her designer heels clicking for the last time on a late fashion group's marble floors, James turned to me with a slight smile. Ready to announce the new direction? I looked at the board members, still processing the morning's revelations. Time to teach them all a valuable lesson about real fashion mathematics. 6 months later, I stood on a late fashion group's newly renovated design floor, watching students from my former math class present their collection ideas. The space, once reserved for only the most prestigious designers, now buzzed with diverse talent from all backgrounds. Miss Park, one of my former students called out, we applied the golden ratio you taught us to the dress patterns. I smiled, remembering how Rebecca had once sneered at my suggestion to use mathematical principles in fashion design. Now, our Math Meets Fashion program was revolutionizing the industry. The elevator dinged and Thomas stepped out. Since Rebecca's departure, he'd been slowly healing, even joining our company's legal team to help protect young designers' rights. The Paris collection numbers are in, he said, handing me a tablet. Turns out authenticity sells better than exclusivity. Our first show under new management had featured designs from scholarship students alongside established names. The fashion world had initially scoffed until the sales figures proved them wrong. Have you heard from her? I asked quietly. Rebecca, he shook his head. Last I heard, she was trying to launch her own line, but without company funds to steal from. Sir, a young intern rushed up to us. James Bennett is here with the community college representatives. The meeting room was filled with educators from local schools, the same institutions Rebecca had refused to work with. James stood at the front, explaining our new apprenticeship program. Every student with talent deserves a chance, he was saying, regardless of their zip code or bank account. I joined them, knowing how different this room felt from the elitist space it had been 6 months ago. The pretentious art had been replaced with student designs. The exclusive guest list had given way to open doors. Sarah, James nodded to me, want to tell them about the mathematics of sustainable fashion. As I took the podium, I caught a glimpse of movement in the hallway. Rebecca stood outside the glass walls, watching. She looked different, simpler clothes, no designer bag. She'd been banned from the building, but security must have let her up for this moment. Our eyes met. In hers, I saw something I'd never seen before. Understanding. Maybe even a hint of respect. I turned back to the eager faces in the room. Fashion isn't just about aesthetics, I began. It's about equations, balance, the perfect ratio of creativity to practicality. And most importantly, it's about multiplying opportunities, not dividing people. Rebecca remained for a few minutes, watching silently as I explained how we were transforming her former fashion empire into an inclusive powerhouse. Then she turned and walked away, her steps lacking their former arrogance. That was closure for her, Thomas said softly. For all of us, I agreed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone's world, it's building a better one in its place. Later that evening, as I packed up my office, still modest despite my position, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a note from Rebecca. You were right. About everything. The real fashion mathematics. Addition through sharing, not subtraction through exclusion. I pinned it to my board next to the company's new motto. Style has no price tag. The lights of the city twinkled outside my window as I gathered my things. Somewhere out there, Rebecca was learning to live without her facade of luxury. And here in the company she thought she owned, a new generation of designers was learning that true elegance comes from authenticity, not price tags. Ready for tomorrow's student showcase? Thomas asked from the doorway. Always, I smiled. After all, the best lessons often come from unexpected teachers. As we left the building, I passed the wall of new designer photos. Faces of every color, background, and neighborhood. Each one proof that my greatest calculation had been correct. Talent X opportunity equals success. The fashion world had learned its lesson, and somewhere in Paris, there was an empty seat at Fashion Week where Rebecca used to sit, now filled by a scholarship student with dreams bigger than any designer label.